The past few years have been interesting when it comes to video games. We've gotten plenty of major AAA titles from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, sci-fi RPGs like Cyberpunk 2077, fantasy RPGs like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and then a whole list of many games out there aside from these, of course. Yet, with each year that passes, people who have long enjoyed video games have become practically disenfranchised by the state of gaming in the modern age. Many have elected to play older titles from the early 2000s and 2010s, others say video games have become boring. Many others disagree and say we've never had so many amazing games. Others say we're just looking at AAA and ignoring indie games, and that's the root of the problem. Whatever your stance is, I think we can all agree that at least in terms of the AAA side of video games, there's a big problem, and it's affecting the way we consume and enjoy this form of entertainment. When you break down the many factors that play into video games and what makes them so good and what the problem could be, I think that there are three major factors that stick out. 1. Corporatization, or basically the intent to maximize profits. 2. A lack of true passion, and 3. Developer management disconnect. Still, could we argue that it isn't the games and rather the people that consume the games, the gamers themselves? Could they also play a role in promoting the problems with modern gaming? I think that yes, there are plenty of reasons why both ends of the spectrum, the game makers and the game players, are at some level of fault in the way things are today. Let's start with the first point, corporatization. What do I mean by this? Well, everything nowadays is an industry. Books, movies, food, social media, and video games. The industry of video games was, for a long time, pretty off to the side. For the most part, all you really heard about video games growing up was probably that they were violent. For people that enjoyed them, there were often lots of jokes about gamers. Jokes about gamers being lazy, slobby, aggressive, and so on and so forth. Then 2020 happened. The world shut down. A pandemic spread to every corner of the globe like plague ink and had people sitting at home all day with absolutely nothing to do. And so people who had never even thought to play video games before suddenly discovered this world of entertainment they didn't think about prior. People started building PCs, buying consoles, making YouTube channels, and going all in on the world of video games. It became an industry so massive, I don't really think anybody was anticipating it. So many people started buying video games and still do, with many getting introduced to the hobby every single day. Obviously, if you're a corporate executive, you'll look at this and see nothing more than green and the potential to make a ton of cash. So AAA companies like EA, Activision, Ubisoft, and more started to try and reshape a bit of the way we play games. Look, monetization is nothing new in the video games industry. We've always seen DLCs, cosmetics, and more being sold. However, I think that we can all agree that the modern age has spurred on monetization in ways that are not familiar to many who remember playing video games when they were younger. While games used to provide more unlockable cool stuff and maybe a DLC here and there, games have now become more expensive and more loaded with microtransactions than ever. Games average well above $70 now, and yet microtransactions can easily rack hundreds for people who buy into them. Take Call of Duty, for example. It's not a cheap game by any means, but it's loaded with tons of microtransactions. From a battle pass to Call of Duty points to skins and blueprints and more. Assassin's Creed, which is a single-player game for the most part, also has microtransactions. It's interesting because these games aren't getting any cheaper, but they're working to make the max amount of profit possible. And yeah, who wouldn't employ this strategy to maximize profit? Development costs are high. After the point of sale, the person purchasing the game is as good as useless to the corporation. You buy a game once. The company only made so much off of you in profit. What better way to continue making money off of you than by shoving microtransactions in your face over and over again, right? At the end of the day, video games have become a multi-billion-dollar industry, and the goal of any industry that large, or really any company for that matter, is to maximize profits. The more money, the happier the company is. It's not about you, the gamer, anymore, it's about your money. And this brings me to my next point. Video games just aren't made with passion anymore. Video games are another form of art. Just like a painting or a book, art is something very unique and engaging. It's at its best form when it's made with passion and enjoyment. That's why you can sometimes feel emotion from a work of art. There was emotion behind it. Video games used to feel more engaging because simply there was just more passion. The pioneers of the industry started because they had a love for this form of art. Since then, it has basically become run by corporate execs who, quite frankly, are just not passionate about the product they sell. They're passionate about profits. So you've removed one of the most important factors in making art, well, art. Games seem to be focused more and more on visuals, graphics, and the aesthetic feel, and not necessarily the gameplay aspect anymore. We praise games for looking visually stunning, but what's a pretty package if the contents inside just aren't good? There's a lot of great looking games, but they're just not good games. Graphics and visuals are simply one side component, but it's what's being focused on. And yeah, it's impressive for sure. Looking at Call of Duty's more recent titles, it's really impressive what we can do visually and graphically for something like a first-person shooter. It just shows how far technology has come since the early days of video game development. However, we can't simply hone in on this one aspect and ignore the external elements that make a game so good, like audio, gameplay, level design, etc. Moving back to the corporatization aspect, I'm not saying that you can't run a business with the goal of making money because that's just wrong. However, if we want to diagnose the problem with modern video games, we have to admit that the intensive corporatization of the industry has created a big disconnect between the product and the product's consumer. The lack of passion has given a massive waypoint for video games to become simply nothing more than mass-produced products. And that's the thing. As much as I enjoy games like Call of Duty, it is truly just the same game at the end of the day every single year. FIFA and NBA and all these yearly release series games simply just repeat themselves over and over again. We're likely seeing tons of franchise fatigue as a result of this sort of behavior. For people who have been playing a particular franchise since they were young, they've likely become tired and likely bored of playing the same game over and over again. Still, you can refute this point pretty easily by stating that if that were the case, how did Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 this year sell faster than Modern Warfare 3 did, which was the fastest prior to Modern Warfare 2, and within such a short period of time? At the end of the day, there will always be new fans and old fans that will continue to buy into this product. To veer from this point, are players somewhat to blame for the issues with modern gaming? In some ways, they do play a role in this situation. Firstly, video game companies have things called pre-orders. When a player pre-orders a game, that company has already made some sort of unearned revenue. So when the player gets access to the game, the company has officially made money from them. Still, what happens after? Microtransactions, DLCs, upgrades, and so much more, and then this all adds up. The more players pre-order, the more companies can get away with making half-finished products because they know that they'll still get tons of pre-orders. And they'll do the same thing next year, and next year, and next year. And until these massive floods of revenue and profit stop coming in, the companies just have no reason to stop doing this. And when players continue to buy microtransactions and make companies billions off of those alone, they will continue to output mass amounts of microtransactions. They simply have no reason to stop doing so. Then again, is it that serious? Is this just an overanalyzation? Does it really matter? Isn't it just a game at the end of the day? Well, no, not really. It's not just a game because technically it's also a product. And when you buy a product, you expect it to be finished and ready for use. Games are different than, say, a mixing bowl, as games are programmed and difficult to make, but games are also products in this corporate industry model. So if your game is unfinished, you just paid full price for half a product. Nobody would accept that in normal standards. So where is the issue at with unfinished games? I'd say it relates strongly to the issue of developers and managers having a disconnect on their goals. Managers and executives in general have goals that do not necessarily take into account the workload placed on developers. As such, they promise things that are beyond the capacity of the development team in the time frame required. This is what happened with Cyberpunk 2077, a game hyped up to extents never seen before for nearly a decade. Turned out to be a pretty big disappointment when it launched in 2020. Now, if the game is enjoyable, that's fine. But we cannot look past the fact that many promises were not delivered upon at the release of Cyberpunk 2077. The marketing team advertised a product to build hype, but in the background that product was not possible for that team to accomplish in the time frame. And then COVID-19 hit and games started getting delayed, and so did Cyberpunk. And then it released unfinished because people were fed up with waiting, and what we got is what we saw in December 2020. Hype building is normal in business. You want people to buy your products, and so you advertise them ahead of time. This makes sure people keep your product in the back of their mind. However, advertising unrealistic goals doesn't help your reputation at all. And this is a big issue in the gaming industry, crunch time. That's why development has such a high turnover ratio compared to many other jobs. Games are difficult, they take time, but you have managers and execs that have a goal, so developers are forced to cut corners and release whatever they can in whatever time is needed. And who pays the price for this unrealistic work? Developers and players. Players pay the price because you just paid a big ticket for an unfinished product. Modern games do have problems. Are they fun? Sure. Do I play new and recent games? Of course. I'm not gonna lie and say that I never play any modern AAA video games whatsoever. However, I will admit that there are issues in the industry. It's more like the modern industry has a problem, not just the games. Bugs and glitches can be funny, but it's not funny if it breaks the entire game and bricks your console and PC. Games have always had problems and they were never perfect. However, if a product is being sold for that much, it is not delivering on its price tag, especially mechanically, there's a problem there. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Is there a problem with modern games, the industry, players, everything? What do you think? And thanks for tuning into DZSH Gaming. If you want more gaming content, subscribe to the channel. If you want content about other topics like entertainment and even fun facts, check out our other YouTube channels as well. Turn on notifications so you never miss out on another upload, and don't forget to leave a like on this video. Check out our website for news, articles, and more, and follow us on our other socials. The links to everything is in the description below.